CFRE process, I'll get us started here. My name is Sarah Espinosa. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for CFRE International. I'm so glad you all are able to join us today. Before we start, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping rules here. This webinar is being recorded. We'll email out the recording link and some additional resources that we talk about throughout the presentation within the next 48 hours, so you should get it by the end of the day on Friday. We will have Q&A throughout the presentation, so we'll have some spots throughout the presentation where you can ask questions. So please feel free to ask questions to our panelists in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. We've also got Paul Cavazos and Christine Johnson here. They are from CFRE International Certification Team, so they're also here to help answer any questions about the application process or the exam that maybe our panelists aren't able to answer. They're here to help out with that as well. So be sure to use the chat for your questions and any comments that you have. And that's it as far as housekeeping. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Jeff Norris. He is the president and CEO of Royal Columbian Hospital Foundation, which we can all see behind him. That's some great marketing behind you, Jeff. He has been a CFRE since 2003. He's a former board member for CFRE International, and we're so grateful to you, Jeff, to be here to help moderate this panel discussion for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, but we'll be over on the chat if you need us.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, for arranging this. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. I know it's an exciting time when they start to think about gaining your CFRE. I remember when I did it, I guess it was just after the turn of the century, as Sarah mentioned, just after the 2000 came around. It was a bit of a different process back then. And so we're quite lucky to have panelists that I assume are a bit more recent than me of going through it. And as Sarah mentioned, I spent about 7 years on the CFRE board, learning a lot of the ins and outs of it and lots of time as an ambassador. And I would say, now I've been 30 years of fundraising. I'm certainly looking as an employer when we're hiring different folks for them to have the CFRE credential. So I really applaud anyone that's moving forward to do that. With that, I just want to introduce our panelists, and they really are going to be our subject matter experts as we go through today. And I'm going to turn over to them just a little bit to talk about themselves. So very first on our screen, I'll turn over to Rehmah to talk about her background and how she came about being a panelist today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rehmah Kasule. I'm in London, Ontario. I must say I'm a donor and a philanthropic advisor, and I'm also a consultant in fund development. But one of the things that I really love is supporting nonprofits to unlock major capital for their social innovations. And I've been a CRA-free, I'm new, since August 2024. And yeah, so that's about me.
Perfect. And maybe Laureen, you could introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. Bonjour, I'm Laureen Bardou. So my pronouns are elle, she, her. I'm based in Montreal, Quebec, where I am the full-time Senior Director of Philanthropy at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts Foundation, and a part-time co-founder and partner at Arbora Philanthropic Dialogue and consulting firm. I've been a CFRE since 2017. At the time, I was working for McGill University, who the team there literally forced me to do the CFRE, and I'm grateful to them until that very specific day. And I serve as a 2025 CFRE Ambassador. So yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Thanks, Laureen. And then last and not least, Brent.
Thanks, Jeff. Like Lauren, my name is Brent Platt. Jean-Marielle, I'm he, him, and I'm currently living in Nova Scotia. We've worked all across the country. Most of my career has been in kind of the social welfare area. Founder of a consulting firm here in Nova Scotia, and I've been a CFRE since 2013. And I've encouraged many of my friends and former colleagues to go through the process, so I'm glad to be here kind of wandering with you guys today.
Perfect. Well, thank you for taking the time out, our lovely moderators. Just quickly through the agenda, you can see it on the screen. We'll give you a bit of a background about what the CFRE is and why we do it. And then we'll probably get into the meat of what most people are interested in, the real process of going through and doing your application and the testing and ultimately getting your CFRE. And hopefully we'll address all the questions that come up throughout the meeting. And I think Sarah mentioned it, but I'll just reiterate it. We are taping the session today. So you don't need to worry about madly taking notes. You can go back and review it. It will be sent out to you at a later date. And then if you're ever feeling that there's questions that you have that aren't getting answered through a session like this, I know the staff at CFRE are wonderful in terms of providing information back and forth whenever you need it. So I really encourage you to reach out to them. All the contact information is on the website, or you can go to succeed@cfre.org. And I will note, as we're going through the questions, we're going to try our best to address questions that are relevant for the most number of people. So if you have something very specific about your own situation that you're going through, we'll maybe that's best to send it through the email address there. So CFRE's got a fairly long history, and actually in some ways dates back to before 1981, and some of the work around the precursor to the Association of Fundraising Professionals. But in 1981 became this standalone organization. And really, it's the only certified credentialing body doing this kind of work across the world. Right now, we're getting up to over 8,200 CFREs across 29 countries and territories. And what we should be very proud about here in Canada, and I'm not sure if everyone knows this, Canada has more CFREs per capita than any other country in the world. So we have the highest concentration of folks that have achieved this credential, and that's something to be very proud of. But it also, as someone, if you're looking at becoming a CFRE and you're working in Canada, it's become more and more important as we move forward. So we should be very proud that we've professionalized the industry in Canada more than any other place. So our first session that we're going to jump around and talk a little bit about with the panelists is these ideas of why you might become a CFRE. So I'm going to go a little bit in reverse order and let people tell their stories of why they decided to jump into the credentialing process and take the work. And there is work involved in becoming it. So first off, Brent, maybe you could talk about what was it about your situation that drew you to taking on the CFRE?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I did my CFRE in my late 20s, just trying to build kind of a little bit of my confidence, but also to show my ability and professionalism in the sector. I was new to moving to a new province, and I had met with a few boards, and there was some trepidation around just working in larger markets. And in speaking with a former colleague in Montreal, they encouraged me to go through the credentialing process, and it really helped. I mean, I learned a lot of things. I've never been a big plan donor guy, but it certainly helped me understand kind of a bigger, more balanced scorecard about how the role that development offices can play. And it certainly gave me the opportunity in my first role as a director of philanthropy for a kind of a mid-sized organization. And it gave me a ton of confidence that I didn't think I was lacking. So that's kind of why I went through the CFRE process in 2013.
Laureen, what's your story? Why did you pursue the certification?
So thanks, Jeff. Earning my CFRE has been a game changer in my career because I did it right when you can do it, like with 5 years in a fundraising role. So to have the right points to the whole form. And coming from the arts and culture sector, I was the first or the second, I don't remember exactly, CFRE in Quebec. because in Quebec we have the language, which is different from the usual test of the CFRE. So that was one of my big challenge to accomplish. But so I'm very proud to be a CFRE, and I talk to every one of my friends in the field and my team, and I see some of my team here at that webinar. So it gave me greater, as Brent was mentioning, greater credibility, a clear boost in confidence others have in my expertise, talking to donors, to internal people as well. And it led very tangible. It led to a salary increase as well. And it was great to negotiate with my new employer as well. And as a CFRE, you know that you are integrity, ethics, and accountability are very important. So you must deliver on best practices, and it is a responsibility that you have to play by the highest ethical standards. So becoming a CFRE is a serious business. So, and it's a responsibility, and it represents a real commitment to the profession. So that's why I am very proud.
I love that idea, the commitment to the profession. I know personally, for me, it was I went down that pathway of wanting to become a CFRE when I knew this was going to be my career moving forward, and I wanted to take it seriously, and I knew by doing it, others would take it seriously. Laureen, you mentioned one thing as you went through that, and I'll maybe just highlight it for a second. You mentioned that you took your test right after 5 years of being going through the professional practice, and that for a long time was the requirement for CFRE. It certainly was what I went through. But we'll highlight it's 3 years now in terms of folks thinking through. So it's
wow, great.
Yeah, it's a little different as we go through. Rehmah, what is your story, your background in becoming a certified fundraising executive?
Thank you, Jeff. So my background is I've been a nonprofit leader for the past 15 years, and I've been doing fundraising, but I didn't realize I was a fundraising professional because I was doing everything from strategy to business development. And so for me, when I came to Western University, I was the director of development foundations. And that's when I heard about CFRE. Before that, I hadn't heard about it. This is about 2 years ago. And I realized, hey, I remember that time I was reading John Maxwell's saying where he says that you have to know yourself to grow yourself. And that's when I was like, hey, maybe I'm a fundraiser. I have so many other degrees and whatever, but maybe I need to call myself a fundraiser. In as much as I have all these other titles and professions, maybe I need to become a fundraiser. And for me, that has become a game changer because once I did it, to everyone's point, I got a lot of credibility. But for me, it wasn't just a professional credibility, but for me, the journey of self-actualization to say, hey, this is who I am, and I've got it. And as a fundraiser and consultant, I'm always constantly navigating between strategy, fund development, new partnerships. But at the heart of my work, I'm always questioning myself, am I growing into full expression of who I'm meant to be? And so for me, CFRE brought that to mind to say, hey, yes, that's what you're meant to be. And of course, in Canada, it has become a key differentiator for me because there are so many consultants doing philanthropic work. However, it has signaled to the donors and the boards that I'm a globally recognized person, and it has boosted my trust in them and also expanded my influence. And of course, it has opened so many doors in terms of consulting, advisory boards. Everyone is looking for, when they are looking for a board of directors, they are reaching out because they now realize that, fundraising professional, which hasn't been the case before. Before they were seeing me as a nonprofit leader or a business development consultant, but they were not seeing me as a development officer. So, yeah.
Excellent. I think you covered off a great variance of the reasons to do it. I think for me, a couple of things that I think about, it's been a long time since I went down the journey of getting it, but even the process of recertifying, which I've been through several times, I really like the discipline that it puts into my professional education and study. That I know there's things that I need to be doing, and it's sometimes easy to push those things to the side. And I'm doing them sort of constantly on a constant basis to make sure that I can recertify. The other point that I've always found interesting about having my CFRE is it was really important to me early in my career, and then lots of people have talked about sort of how that can help with advancements and negotiating salaries and doing things like that. But later in my career, when I wanted to move into leadership positions, where it wasn't a professional fundraiser that was hiring me, where it was a board of directors and folks that might not have a great understanding of the skill set required to be in these positions, having that credibility of being able to say that an independent body had certified that I had this skill set and had been meeting all those standards was really critical in being able to take on those leadership positions later in my career. So really important things. Paul and Christine, and we've covered off a lot, but is there anything that's coming in from the chat that needs to be addressed?
No questions yet, so feel free to submit those questions, and we'll do our best to answer them and ask them to the panelists.
I do
Perfect.
actually, I'm going to jump into this with Sarah. I have one that came in advance. We ask all our attendees to submit questions in advance, so I've got one that might be good for this time frame. How has holding the CFRE advanced your career?
Oh, awesome. Rehmah, why don't we start with you?
Sure. For me, I think it's been a catalyst for deeper influence. As a consultant, I didn't mention that. So with that realization, after I did the CFRE, I left Western University and I went back to being a full-time consultant. And what that has done for me is so when I'm speaking to organizations, it's now shifted my perspective from just fundraising to looking at systems and transformation. So when I do capacity building for them, I look for those ideas to say, I'm speaking now as a donor, having a donor-centric mindset to say, what would the donor want? And so it has broadened my perspective when I'm supporting nonprofits to think through their strategy and sustainability. And that, of course, has created more opportunities for me because I remember one of the last conversations I had, the woman said, you be different from other consultants. And I was thinking, wow, that's a good thing to hear. It builds your confidence by opening those doors that ideally I wouldn't walk through.
I'll jump in and then I'll maybe turn over to Brent and Laureen. One thing that was useful for me is that I spent most of my career in education or healthcare, and so these are heavily credentialed fields when your colleagues you're working with are doctors and PhDs and holding other sorts of backgrounds and credentials. And it certainly gave me a credibility amongst my peer group in those kinds of organizations to be able to say that I've gone through the professional and ethical standards to reach a credential in my own vocation. Over to Laureen.
So in my case, so it helped me advance my career and take leadership position, as you mentioned earlier, Jeff. But each time, because I'm in the arts and cultural sector, each time I needed to explain what the CFRE credential was. And what I said previously is that it's when I was working for 3 years at McGill University. So to your point, Jeff, with credential and higher education, so they literally encouraged me from the moment I was hired to pass the exam. And just for the audience here, so I failed the first time and I got it the second time. So, we all can do it. So basically it's that to advance the career.
And Brent, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think you all touched on it, but to Laureen's point, every time I would introduce myself as a professional fundraiser, I'd watch people like hold their wallets and get like uncomfortable up against the wall. So getting to teach people about the CFRE has been kind of a fun journey as well. And I'm glad to say that in probably the last 18 months, more and more boards that I sit down and meet with, or groups that I'm doing some consultative work with, actually are aware of what it is. So I'm just glad to see that the credential is getting certainly well known.
Perfect. Well, I think we'll get into the meat of where most people are on this process. These are the three steps around becoming a CFRE. The first, of course, being the application. And I'm assuming lots of people on the call maybe already started that, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. The exam itself, sitting for the exam, and then ultimately recertification. I alluded to that. Every 3 years, once you become a CFRE, you're going to have to recertify. And in terms of doing that recertification, you need to keep doing the work around education, professional development, professional practice. But you don't need to do the exam at the end of those 3 years to keep your certification coming forward. We won't focus very much on recertification right now, just because the focus of this is on the steps of becoming the CFRE. So let's move to the application process. So at this stage, the application process, if you haven't gone in and registered to do that work, go into the webpage, look at it, set up your account. And the great thing about it is you can start filling up your application long before you actually intend to submit it to do your exam. So you start populating it with your education requirements, other requirements as you go along. And one of the biggest pitfalls, and I've heard this for years when I'm teaching a class or talking to folks that are going along to do their CFRE, the biggest pitfall people find is when they finally go to do their application, filling out the final version of their application, remembering when they did this session, remembering when this class was, remembering how many hours it was to add up their points, tends to be actually one of the biggest barriers for them getting their application in when they want to do it. They just can't go back and find all the data and all the information. So I stress as much as possible, even if you're not thinking about wanting to write the exam and get your application in, a week from now or a month from now or even a year from now, is to actually get yourself registered onto that site and start just making a habit of when you go and you do something that's qualifies for CFRE points, you're adding it in there, you're populating that all the times, because it makes it way easier when it comes time to actually submit your application and go through. So do that. You'll submit your application as you go. CFRE staff's going to review your application, make sure it meets the criteria. There is a certain percentage that are going to get flagged for a higher level of scrutiny coming through. And that's including recertification. I've had that happen to me a couple times over the period of time, and that is really coming back to the fundamental, quality that the CFRE actually is. It's an outside certified body that actually looks at CFRE to make sure it's meeting those kinds of standards. There is really significant rigor going on both behind the scenes, and you can see some of it in front of the scenes. And so those spot studies are really important. So make sure you've got your backup and those kinds of things for the information you're putting in, because you might have to look at that. I've heard many folks from the CFRE office say that, particularly on the education side, that if you've gone to more things than you're required to meet your points, don't be afraid to put more items in, because if for some reason one of those items is disqualified because you didn't have the right backup or that information, at least you sort of have a backup piece to going through. So those are really good as you go through that. The approved applications, you're going to be sent an advisory from the staff letting you know that you have been approved, and the instructions on how to schedule exam. And then ultimately, you're going to be able to set up your appointment for your exam. Really different than maybe how it's been in the past. There's way easier ways to do exams in terms of online abilities. I remember the exam I did. I had to go to a specific testing center. This is over 20 years ago. Sit down with a pencil, answer all the questions. Someone would take it. It would go in an envelope, and a couple months later, I got an envelope back in the mail that told me whether I passed or not. Not like that anymore whatsoever. You're doing your exam right away on a computer, and you're getting your scores right away as you go through. That's a little overview of the application process, and maybe we'll move on to the application requirements. So going through this, we have three main areas that you have to acquire points in: education, professional practice, professional performance. Each one of those is graded and weighted in different ways. And so, for instance, education, there's generally a 1-to-1 point scoring for attending sessions. But if you're lucky to be in the position where you're presenting or you're creating new materials, you can get added points for doing that. And so it's an interesting motivation, maybe if you're thinking of going and speaking at a conference or some sort of workshop that's local. It's a great way to move it up. Professional practice, and this is back to this point of being generally people can get their professional practice points within a 3-year period of time if they're working full time to get the overall 36 points, and then professional performance. And that's going across a variety of different duties that you can have within your organization. And again, the application process will help you go through and figure out all those perfect numbers. So I'll ask our panelists as we're going through. I gave one of my tips in terms of starting that application process as early as possible and populating as early as possible. But from the panelists, as you went through the application process, what were maybe some of the tips you have to people be success? And Laureen, I appreciated you pointing out that you didn't make it through the test on your first time through, because that's just really useful information. And maybe if there's any sort of pitfalls or mistakes you made in the process, and for me, that mistake I made was not collecting enough information over a 5-year period of time, which is what it was to be ready to do it right at those 5 years. What maybe some mistakes you made? Maybe we'll start with Brent.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think documentation is so key. As you mentioned, when I did it the first time, I just made sure I had the bare minimum points. And just because I'm extremely lucky as an individual, I was flagged for some added questions, which were quite helpful because the staff at CFRE actually helped uncover a few points that I didn't include. So important to write stuff down. And the joy of technology nowadays is every time I go to something, I make sure to shove it in my CFRE calendar. So when it comes time for recertification, I can sit down and do that. And when you're going through the application process, it's really helpful if you have somebody that can help hold you accountable to the process. So if you have a friend or a colleague or a mentor that's gone through and has their CFRE, if you feel comfortable, reach out to them. I've sat down with probably 15 or 20 folks and gone through the application process, often with a bottle of wine, because I find really tedious tasks go far better with like a nice Riesling or a really nice Pinot Noir. But that's just my own personal choice. You can choose whatever you need. And sometimes it's helpful to just have a second voice that can help walk you through that. So those were the little tips that I've got.
Hey, Rehmah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. For me, I think I had to do a lot of learning and relearning. When coming in as a fundraising professional, you feel like you know things, but then you realize, hey, this is different and it's more professional than you thought. But yeah, having that supportive network around you. So what I did is before I even said I'm applying, I spoke to so many people who have gone through it to understand and learn and know what perspectives do I want to go through. And what helped me personally is the fact that I've been fundraising for a nonprofit, like bringing in a lot of money, but I had less of the reading and the education aspect of it. But having that and still to everyone's point, going back to say, how much did I raise there? What part was my part of my contribution? What did I do? Really putting like I did some kind of resource map where I'm like, what did I do? What did I study? And but yeah, having a supportive network around you is really incredible. And I must say, for me, this has been very great for me, even after I did the certification. where you have this diverse community of professionals who are so generous with their knowledge and they are committed to ethical practice and they want you to win and succeed. It's been amazing that way.
Perfect. And Laureen.
Yes, so maybe just to add to the supporting network that Rehmah is referring to, it's really important to not give up on the process when you fill out the points and everything, and go to your fellow CFRE colleagues and ask colleagues at work if they are CFRE. There is a big community of CFRE ambassadors. Sarah has a list, so reach out and do it step by step, and wine helps for sure. But people holding the CFRE accreditation, they're just very willing to talk to you and to be more and more CFRE in your sectors and locations. So reach out.
Perfect. I see a few questions coming in on line. Paul, do you want to read them out, or do you want us to pull them up?
Yeah, I can read some of these out. So here's a great one. Can you add volunteering at a fundraiser for CFRE credits? And also, what about things like technology trainings for Razor's Edge, for example? And
Okay.
I can answer that if you want me to.
Fire away, Paul.
So great. So yes, you can get points for volunteering. That's considered service learning, and that can be applied towards your education requirement. Unfortunately, any volunteer fundraising opportunities that you do are not eligible for practice or performance. So you can only get credit for volunteer stuff in the education piece. As far as fundraising software like Razor's Edge trainings and maybe Salesforce trainings or whatever, as long as they're fundraising specific to learn how to manage your software, they're okay. You can get credit for those. I'll ask another one. Jeff, is education for the education requirement, is authoring required?
No. So it can be going to different seminars, webinars. It can be academic degrees. Authoring is great because you'll actually get additional points for being an author, or creating new work, or presenting as panelists, but none of that's actually required. You can just be completely a learner and not be creating new information to get those points.
Great. So here's some questions that came a little bit earlier. Do you have any recommendations for someone who feels like it's taking them a long time to meet the education requirement?
Ooh, I would say as much as you can, get yourself connected in with a network of education providers. And I realize there could be potentially costs associated with them. So you look at these different professional associations. But what I've seen within sort of our groups of fundraisers is not everyone's a member of every organization. But often those organizations are offering educational opportunities for non-members as well. And so within that cohort, if I'm a member of, say, AFP and someone's not, I'm actually just forwarding them off emails to say, hey, there's a really interesting session going on. You should think about doing that. So that's one way, is making sure you've got sort of a wide breadth of opportunities coming to you. And now with so many of them, online, where you don't need to travel and very flexible, it's a little bit easier to pick those up. The other thing in terms of getting yourselves on some of those mailing lists, and some of them are actually coming from professional trainers and things like that. There's a number of free sessions coming up on a very regular basis. That again, if you're getting in that network of those things popping up, they come at a very, very consistent pattern. So I mean, even just by participating in webinars and online sessions, someone could quite easily be able to pick up their points, as long as you're attuned to all the different opportunities coming through. The other thing is your education points can be collected over a 5-year period of time. It goes back 5 years. So, if you're doing an academic degree or you're doing something like that, you're going to be able to transfer some of those points across. Or if you're going to your employers and talking to them about wanting to go to a specific training session or a conference or those sorts of things, you can collect a number of points in a very, very short period of time. Any of our panelists, did you have some other ideas of how to collect those points?
I was just going to say conferences are a great opportunity. And there's a few of them that are virtual too. So I live in a kind of rural, tiny part of Nova Scotia. So sometimes I don't always feel like hopping on a plane and going somewhere. So there's lots of great opportunities out there if you just kind of keep your eyes and ears open.
Perfect. Paul, any other questions we should address while we're on this section?
That's it for questions that I have that are not specific to someone's status. So
Perfect. Once you've done your application, obviously, next stage is writing the exam. You can see it's offered 4 times throughout the year in different testing windows. You can come through and find your appropriate deadline. So I guess our next one coming up is July now for the July 15th to September window. Yeah, get your application in, do your testing windows, and once approved, you don't need to necessarily take it in that window. So say you get approved this July 15th, you've got up to a year to choose your time to actually go through and sit the exam. Any questions that came up, Paul, about booking the exam?
not about booking the exam. I do have some questions about exam prep, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah, that's always the big one everyone wants to talk about, exam prep, which is totally fair. So across when you get into the exam, you'll see that's 200 multiple choice questions. I had the pleasure of for years sitting on the exam committee, which works on setting up the questions. And I got to say, if you want to see a rigorous, disciplined process, it is how questions get onto the exam. They go through multiple fundraisers who are reviewing the questions, refining the questions, making sure they're properly referenced to relevant material right now. And then from there, they'll actually go on to the exam as a test question, and we'll see the results and see if they actually have any predictability of someone passing the exam, whether they're good. And then they get re-reviewed by subject matter experts to make sure that they're appropriate to go on the exam. Then they go on the exam, and then they're reviewed constantly to see if they're performing in the way we'd expect. And we see a great correlation between people answering the question right or not as we go forward. So really, really intense work that goes into the actual exam questions coming through. The other thing I would note for the exams themselves, we do need to cover all these knowledge areas, and you see them up across the screen. And then within that, the folks that are writing the exam questions do great work, and it's particularly something that's been modernized over the last 5 or 6 years because it's an international exam, 29 countries involved, and many people where English wouldn't be their first language. The exam questions are written in the most straightforward way possible. So there's not a lot of trick questions or back and forth. And that's probably been a bit different than some of the folks on this call of when they've taken the exam in the past. The modern version of the exam is in the most straightforward possible manner in terms of what the questions coming through. The other thing I would say is you want to go into the exam with the mindset of you're going to pick the best question based on fundraising knowledge across all sectors, all areas. So you will find yourself in a situation, I almost guarantee it, where you're going to sit down and there's going to be a question, and of the 4 multiple choice answers, what you do in your organization is going to be the wrong answer. It's not the best practice across all organizations. It may work for your organization. I'm not saying it's wrong for your organization, but it's important you know the theory behind fundraising and not just the practice of what's happening in your particular organization. So always looking at selecting the best possible answer as you go through there, and then ultimately you get your scoring coming through. I don't think I need to go into a lot more detail about that. Anything just in the questions that needs to be addressed here, Paul, from the chat?
Nothing yet.
Okay, so now we'll get into the intense part, which is studying for the exam as you start to prepare. I'll start this one off by actually turning over to the panelists for a little while, and maybe you can talk about your process of how you prepared to write the exam. So, Rehmah, maybe I'll go with you first.
Hi, thank you, Jeff. For me, I say this personally, I wouldn't advise someone to do the way I did it because so this is what I did. I applied for everything, then I waited, and then I realized the year was ending, my term was ending, and I started panicking. But what I did, I always begin with the end in mind. So I put a date and said, I'm going to stick to it. I'm not going to change my date. So I worked backwards and said, hey, I know that date. This is the date I'm going to do it. And I can't shift it to the next year. I'm not about to pay more money to shift it. This is the date. And then I worked backwards and I know Jack had all those amazing study samples, and I'm like, no, let me create my own. And what I did really for me, I started, like I said, I don't want people to follow what I did because it was crazy. I started with the questions before reading. I started by going online and reading those questions and doing the exams to say, where am I really in terms of my knowledge? That's what I did. And then I realized, hey, you're really badly off. And then I went back and started reading. But for me, it helped me to judge where I am and also being truthful about it. But one thing I'll say, and I'll tell anyone who wants to do this exam, it's about the confidence that you bring that is within you to say, you know what, I'm going to do it. And there's no second chance to make the first impression right. I must get it right. But for me, Brent talked about accountability. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she told me, "Mommy, you are always telling me to pass my exams. You better pass yours." And believe it or not, that was a driving factor for me to know I must pass this exam. Otherwise, she's going to question me. And what will I say to her? That why have I failed? So really having a goal, but beginning with the end in mind and setting and being committed to that time. Otherwise, you can go on and read for the next 3, 4 years, and every time you're postponing.
Perfect, Laureen.
Yes, thanks very much. So I'm not a good example to follow either, because I was a major gift officer at the time, so I was very major gift focused, so did not have any experience in annual campaigns, volunteer engagement, or plan giving. So I did just ask to my colleague at the university at the time about what they were doing, how they do their job, and with a couple of books I read and a couple of webinars as well, it helped me a lot. You know, I was not a plan giving officer, so I did need to train myself on that theoretically. And I think, Jeff, you made the perfect point and great point about that you have to select the best answer to each questions, because sometimes all of the 4 answers are right, and you have to select the best one, and don't always follow your instinct in terms of what you're doing in your organization or depending in the sector you work in. So yes, so that's how I did prepare 4 weeks ahead of the exam, and I failed, and then I try it again.
Brent, anything to add?
Yeah, again, with accountability, also just kind of setting aside time to sit down and study. And I think everybody's kind of mentioned this, but you kind of know your own strong suits. So when you look at how the exam is divided, look at the areas in which you don't practice on a regular basis and maybe lean into those a little bit more. Um, there's lots of resources like Quizlets or the practice exam flashcard that the CFRE offers. There's lots of options out there. But sometimes if you rely a little too much on questions that are already written, thinking like, oh my gosh, I know this question is going to be on the exam, it may cover the subject matter, but you're not necessarily going to find any of the questions that are going to be on the exam. I don't think any of the questions that are on the published exam are still, you can go and find them. So even if you study a bunch of them, just remember that subject matter is important, not so much just the wording.
Excellent. I guess I would add, for me, it's embracing the idea that studying's a feature, not a flaw. You're becoming a CFRE because you're taking this profession seriously, and so embrace the exercise of learning about the profession from top to bottom, and learn about it because you want to learn about it, not because you want to pass the exam. I've seen people, really, try to focus in on, and Brent kind of mentioned it. How do I get this question, that question, this question? And I think if you've got a good, strong, well-rounded knowledge of fundraising, you're going to pass the exam as people go through. And so do it because you're going to be better fundraiser, and the passing the exams an output of that rather than the end goal. That'd be my advice as you're going through. Paul, there must be some questions about this coming up, folks.
We have a quiet audience today. So a question just came in. How helpful is it to have experience in fundraising from institutional donors for restricted funding?
No, it's not specifically required to come through the exam. So most of the exams you go through, it's not going to be super niche in terms of where the questions are asked. It's written so that people can come from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of sectors, and still get through. So that sounds way more specific than an area I'd spend a ton of time focusing on in my studies.
Thanks. That's it.
Perfect. So the other thing that
I was gonna say, I'll jump in here, Jeff. I had a couple that came through in advance that I can run through a little bit. How long did it take everyone to prepare for the exam, and how did you make time to study with a busy life?
So I'll confess, I mean, all three of us that don't do what we did in terms of going through the exam, and mine was a while ago. I didn't really do any special studying when I went through the exam. But I was already spending, a fair amount of time wanting to read and learn about what was going on in the profession, and I was sort of dedicated to the profession, and so I focused on some of the areas that I was weak on, or knew I hadn't done work on or hadn't learned about as I went up to it, and Rehmah and I had the opposite approach, because I went in going, it's okay if I fail the first time, and then I'll know where I really stand. And if I have to go back and do some more work to get through the second time, then I will do that. So mine was more about an exploration of the industry rather than specifically carving out time to study for the exam. Laureen?
Can you repeat the question, Jeff? Sorry.
What specific tricks did you or ways did you find to do your studying, and then how did you carve out time outside your regular life?
Okay. Well, I didn't have kids at the time, so I had more time, but it was basically in the evenings and weekends, but I did not study that much either, and that's why I failed the first time. And I did see a question in the chat regarding if you take another time the CFRE exam. Yes, you have to pay, and so I did it on my own personal money because it was paid by my job at first, and I failed.
And Brent?
Yeah, I'm a little anal retentive on the best of days, so my life is run by a little tiny rectangle that lives in my pocket. So I schedule time to study, and academic were never my strong suit. So I had to hold myself accountable to that. And I had some folks, including my mentor, kind of keep my nose to the grindstone. And I was very happy to be done the exam once I finished it. Although not as long as Jeff. When I wrote mine, you had to wait about 3 weeks to get the response. And I've never checked mail as religiously as I did then. So I'm glad to hear people find out right away now when they pass.
There you go. The other big thing is study groups have been huge. The practice exam is a new feature that folks have that's been really, really good as they go. The study guide is really useful. Of course, the reading resources to focus in on those. as you're coming in. Lots of opportunities to study. And then some people make sure that they intensify their PD work that they're doing during that year as they're leading up to writing the exam. And then keep in mind, those are points that that you're going to be able to use for recertification later. So it all comes around. The other thing is in terms of carving out time, you should be going to your employer and having a discussion about your goals to do that. This is a professional development goal for you to do it, and you should be able to make the case that this is actually not going to just benefit you, but it's going to benefit the organization. I mean, as someone, we've got 30 fundraisers that work here. Knowing a fundraiser is going to be spending an intense amount of time learning how to be better at their work on a daily basis. For me, I'm like, that's a wonderful thing. So we always want to find ways for them to be able to carve out time and to be able to incorporate that into their work life as well. So do have an honest discussion with your employer that this is something that you're trying to do, and see if there's opportunities for them to support you in that. And I know we're getting close to time, so we'll start talking about our next session, our next section, which is just around the fees associated with it. So there are the opportunities for the standard fee. You see that on screen, $875, and then participating organization fees. There's a huge number of participating organizations that are involved with this. Do look and see if it makes sense to have a membership in one of those organizations. Particularly, we talked about collecting the PD points, that it might be actually very valuable to have that as you're leading into it, because you've got that discount coming through as you're going through. You can find the list of the organizations, of course, if you went to the CFRE website going through. And maybe we'll pop to the last screen, unless there's a question on that. Nope, there's perfect. So then getting support, I mentioned this earlier, really, really great team at CFRE International that's able to answer your questions, get back to you really, really quickly. There's also the CFRE Ambassadors, and ambassadors that often work as mentors. You see, even from folks online, you can see people in your local area that are going through the same thing as you. They're usually fairly easy to connect with. You just get the word out. I mean, one thing I love about the fundraising profession is it tends to be very collegial. We all get to know each other, and folks tend to want to help out their peers as they're going through these things. So I would say, is if you're looking for support or a community doing the same thing, if you just put it out there and start reaching out and talking to folks, or attending something like this and noting the participant list of who might be local in your area, who you want to connect with, those are great things as well as to go through. So before we wrap up, I just want to pause and see if there's any final questions, Paul or Sarah, that we need to address before we end for the day.
I don't have any questions. Sarah, do you have anything?
Let's see. I've got a number we can keep running through here. Let's see. I don't know that everybody talked about this, but how long did it take each of you, kind of from start to finish, to get your CFRE? What was your timeline for your process?
Me, it was 6 years. So I would have been a little sooner than that, but I decided I wanted to do it fairly early into. I've been fundraising for 30 years, but so it's fairly early into my fundraising work. I decided I wanted to do it, and I set my course along doing it. But I was one of those folks that ultimately couldn't get my application in because I couldn't document and remember things I did 5 years earlier. So it took me a little longer to get all my points sorted out. Brent.
I think I was about 8 months from when I opened my application to getting everything in, to getting audited, to writing the exam, and then waiting for a letter to come in the mail.
Rehmah?
Mine was also about 8 months.
Laureen?
And mine was 12 months because I had to repass it.
Perfect. Sarah, other questions?
Let's see. What is one thing you wish you had known before starting the CFRE journey?
Brent?
Yeah, I guess the beginning of my CFRE journey is I wish I had a much more eloquent way of explaining what the CFRE was when people would ask me after I passed the exam what it was. Um, but yeah, reading books and staying up to date on professional development pieces and writing things down so that when you fill out your application, I guess Jeff, you spoke about this, but for recertification, once you all go through the process and you're all successful and you pass the exam and you're all excited and you hang that diploma on the wall, open up your recertification process right away and start tracking all your stuff so you don't have to try to put it in at the last minute.
Rehmah, anything to add?
I think for me, CRF3 is not just about acquiring the skills, credibility, and confidence, but you also get this commitment to ethical standards and lifelong learning. I think that's so important for us as for fundraisers to have that mindset of, hey, it's not just at the end point. I need to keep learning and learning and relearning.
Laureen?
I would have studied a bit more, but I was happy to do it in my 5th year of fundraising because I had all of the education points.
Yeah, for me, I wish I'd thought about it a little bit sooner in my career, and I could have picked it up earlier if I'd started working towards it. So, like I say, when I meet very new fundraisers, I used to teach a class for people, in their first year of fundraising, and I would say right away, I'd flag for them, hey, start thinking about it now, and build towards it, because ultimately, if this is the profession you want to be able to do it. And I'm seeing the time, we're coming up right on 12 o'clock, so it's probably appropriate to do thanks. If there's any questions that haven't been answered, I'm sure Sarah and Paul will be able to get back to you, or feel free to contact succeed at cfre.org. But just on behalf of everybody on the call, I want to thank everybody for taking an hour out of your day to learn about this. I can speak, I think, for all the panelists. None of us regret the idea of putting the work in to becoming a CFRE. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's probably one of my proudest professional accomplishments, and it's something that's just reaped huge rewards for me, both in my career and just my satisfaction in doing the work. I mean, there's something great about really having a true better understanding of the way your profession works, and the key science behind what you're doing, and being able to be successful with that. So I really applaud everyone who's stepping forward on that journey, and we wish you great success. And even though this was just an hour-long call, again, I'm going to speak for all our panelists and myself. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, if you have connections, if you want to meet someone locally, or even not someone locally, just within sectors. I'm sure all of us would be willing to hear from you and help you in any way we can. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.